Hi, I'm Dr. Kate Walker, and welcome to Hire Right the First Time. And I think this is going to be pretty much a question and answer thing. Of course, I've got a PowerPoint, so I'm going to go ahead and share, not scare, and let you guys kind of see my take on it. Because as I was thinking about this and talking to people about this, hiring, it means so many different things to so many different people. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to start out with the language that made sense to me as I put this together. Because when I do consultations, when people come and ask me questions, it's usually in relation to supervision. So you're a supervisor, you've hired some therapists, or your associate is working for you, or something's gone wonky, and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And what we can usually trace it back to is either a front end problem or a back end problem. So the way I define it for the purposes of our presentation today, the front end I define as the interviewing and the screening, finding the best candidate. If you get my emails, I even talk about creating some healthy competition among candidates so you can pick the right one. So those are all, in my mind, how I define a front end problem. And then I think of the other side, the back end problem. That's where the progressive discipline plan comes in. Are you following through on your progressive discipline plan? Are you firing the people who need to be fired? Or are you just making the good people quit because you won't fire them? And then CYA, just making sure that you understand as a business owner, you're having to document everything. And Texas is a right to work state, but nobody likes to pay unemployment, and they don't like to see their rates go up. And so it's important that you understand how to make sure you're documenting what you should document. So before I go on, let me pause just a second, and you can pop it into the chat, or since we're such a small group, go ahead and holler out if you'd like, and just let me know if there's something you want to make sure that I cover tonight. And I have the chat open so I can do it both ways. I can hear you or I can see you. We're just going to play it by ear. I don't mind doing that.
I said, I don't mind talking. I just didn't want to take over.
Thank you.
Basically, one is how to find quality candidates. I have been an individual and in a leasing office space position. I am ready to transition into a group. And I actually put it out on Indeed, and I didn't get anyone. I had multiple people apply, nobody that I would be willing to hire.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe I'm asking the wrong questions. And so it is that front end stuff that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But it also scares me because, and it's I've decided, I believe, just for liability, and maybe I'm wrong, that 1099 is the way I want to go initially. Not married to that idea, but it is,
Mm-hmm.
What are the pitfalls of both and what are the benefits of both? I'd like
Mm-hmm.
to hear that. And then I think that's mostly about how to find those quality candidates, how to hire them,
Mm-hmm.
which way to go. And maybe even the firing. I've never been in a situation where I had to, like with my admin at the office,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I've been lucky. And so when I'm not lucky, how to handle that. But I do know that I had an admin that I come from a school system
Mm-hmm.
background. And so we documented everything in the school system. And so that carried over with this one person. She quit, but then she went and filed unemployment.
Yeah.
And all that documentation I had was very beneficial. So
Mm-hmm.
I did that by default, but I don't know if I was missing something with that. So.
Okay. And when you say find quality candidates, I'm going to assume you mean licensed folks.
Starting off, I do want licensed. I am, I don't know how much to tell, but anyway.
Well, you're looking for counselors, not front office staff.
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
I'm looking
that's what
for
I want to know.
therapist, and I would like fully licensed. I know
Mhm.
that encouragement that is there for intern associates, but I'm scared. The
Mhm.
reliability.
Got it. Okay, and this is great. This is giving me a good direction. Anybody want to add to that? Yeah, Michelle.
I would. Hi, good evening. I have a similar situation in that I've been ready to go for a long time in terms of my ambition. I think my fear is getting somewhat in the way of liability. My interest is in hiring 1099 fully licensed candidates at first, and then very similarly to what you just visited about is looking then to add associates. I'd like to get my feet wet with being an employer first with fully licensed individuals. And so the things that are feeling overwhelming to me and confusing, I've sort of made a decision, I think, although I'm still open to, like, I'm okay on the 1099 versus W-2. I think I want to do 1099. And but what gets in the way for me, I think, is a lot of what you're talking about, like the interviewing, how to find an appropriate candidate, and then sort of those, like the work process in between is like, okay, like what would that look like in terms of, paying for my HR and paying for theirs and advertising for them and things like that. So there's a lot of those kind of more intricate things.
You're talking about HR? Did you say HR?
Nope. Like the electronic health records,
okay.
like what I maintain my records in. And so things like that. And
so
then
let me clarify, Michelle, you're talking also about sort of like how you would pay them or what they would pay you.
No, in terms of like what I would provide, because I have an idea and I tend to be a little bit too giving up front. I think that's my personality, is like, I think I would be more inclined to overpay than to underpay. And so maybe in learning what is reasonable and out there in terms of that. Another thing that, sorry, as I'm talking about, I lost my train of thought because I was thinking about some other things with the interviewing, but basically like the intricacies of workflow, things like that, what that would look like for the person. Like I have an idea, but I'm not sure if what I'm envisioning is appropriate or way out of line. Another thing, it just came back to mind is, so I'm an LPC, and I did a consultation actually with somebody else about these things, and a very reputable person. And I told the person that I had read in ACA that fee splitting is unethical. And the person is an LPC in a different state and just had no idea what I was talking about. And I see everywhere that a lot of people are doing a fee split, but ACA has a pretty well-known publication, I thought, out there that says you don't do that.
Right.
And so I
can talk about that too.
Yeah, I was gonna not do that, and the person was just like, I've never heard of that, and so it's trying to explain, well, this is where it is, and this is what it says. And I noticed that on the online forums that we're all on together, a lot of people talk about fee splits, and I think I remain confused because with so many people doing that, yet they say ACA says we're not supposed to do that. So I'm a little confused on that issue.
Okay, this is good. I think what I have will be, you'll be able to kind of insert your questions and comments.
Okay, great, thank you.
Because and this goes for everybody. So please feel free to stop, and let's fill in the blanks here. So when I think about hiring, let's start with why hire. Right? You're hiring because you're overwhelmed. You're hiring because you are bored and you want something to do. And maybe you're tired of doing your social media. You're tired of taking care of the front office staff. You're tired of doing this or that, and you're ready to hire it out. Maybe you lack expertise. So that's why you're getting a CPA instead of continuing to file your taxes yourself. Gay Hendricks talks about your zone of genius, and that's important to understand. Your zone of genius is maybe not keeping track of all the Keurig cups in your lobby, right? Maybe your zone of genius is designing presentations for schools so that everyone can go out and do health fairs. So we hire out for lots and lots of reasons. So the time we talk about scale, because if your business isn't scaling, or if it's growing too fast, you're going to have problems. Now, it's funny because scale isn't a word that counselors are kind of raised with, right? When we're doing our program, and everybody always says, well, nobody teaches us business, nobody talks to us about these things. Well, scaling it just means it's outgrowing you. And I'm going to talk about that more as well. So I love this because I'm a tattoo fan, and in my family, my kids get tattoos, and we always say, no regrets. And, 1 Corinthians, right? So something as simple as hiring, you can start off making mistakes at the very front end. And I am always going to teach you. And if you consult with me, I'm going to ask you these questions. I want to know why you're hiring in the first place. So if you're not sure, like I'm going to say, where's your strategic plan? I want to see where this fits into your plan. A common mistake is you don't know the job well enough to know if it's being done correctly. Now, I know that would be weird if we're thinking about hiring a therapist, because of course you know how to do therapy and you know what is done right, or what good looks like. But here's the problem, right? Therapy is done in secret. You don't know something's going wrong until you get a complaint, or until you notice, oh my gosh, my therapist didn't show up for the 3rd time, right? That's when you know things are going wrong. And so I hear you both very clearly, and I'm sure everybody has kind of shared the same thing. It's scary to think about hiring an LPC associate because of the liability. When I had a big practice, I had 2 complaints filed against my very mature, fully licensed folk. So when that happens, it's understanding, knowing the job well enough isn't the therapy piece. It isn't the delivering services piece. It is the policy and procedures. Did you explain how to show up, when to show up, what to do? And I will show you a policy and procedures manual, and I can give that to everyone as a part of this presentation as well. And the other piece of that, and I don't want to put too much emphasis on this, because I think as counselors, most of us are very kind of regimented. Like if we're going to start a business and hire people, we're going to have this amazing policy and procedures manual. We may add music, we may add PowerPoints and animals and singing, singers and dancers, right? We're going to make this amazing policy and procedures manual. But will you also have an orientation, right? An orientation is just maybe you buy sandwiches for everybody, you sit down, everybody learns exactly what these policies and procedures are. Also, do you keep your policies and procedures in a file that stays like, concrete, or is it in a 3-ring binder that is constantly changing? Because that's really what a policy and procedures manual is. It is constantly changing. You base hiring on interviews rather than a probationary period. Interviews are, and I want to talk about how to find good candidates. Interviews are overrated. When you're trying to find good counselor interviews, what have we trained these folks to do? I mean, I've taught internship, right? We teach people how to make eye contact, nod, lean forward, mirror you a little bit, and take their time and answer and do that ambidextrous thing. Think about what they're going to say while you're talking. So folks who are counselors can interview magnificently. So one of the things I teach when I talk about hiring is this idea of a probationary period. Can they maintain what you need them to do for a certain amount of time, rather than just relying on a contract and saying, okay, it's a done deal? Another common mistake, no follow through with your progressive discipline plan, and I will show you in detail one of those. Another common mistake, you think you're supposed to have it, but you really don't need it, which is just going back to your strategic plan, right? You maybe have some comparison going on with other people and you think it's time to grow, that shiny objectitis, Or I always think it's funny when people hire like a social media manager. It's like, okay, but how are you using social media to drive clients into a space where you're then going to pre-qualify them to, yeah, I'll give you a copy of the PowerPoint for sure. So you're pre-qualifying these clients, and then you're not going to be friends with them anymore on Facebook, or you're not going to let them follow you anymore. So I think a lot of times a huge mistake I see has to do with either you think you're supposed to have it, but you really don't need it, or you need it, but it's gotten out of control. And sometimes we call this sunk costs. Like, well, I've already put so much into this person, I don't want to fire them. I think I'm just going to remediate them for the 12th time. Or maybe we just need to sit down and have another conversation about this. And I have seen some really terrible situations. I think of contract therapists, ghosts, and bullies. So these are folks that you just never see them, right? They maybe rent the office on Wednesday at 3 to 5, and then they don't come to staffings. They're not keeping up their end of the contract, but they don't answer your voicemail either. And there's really nothing you can do because, technically those clients are theirs, and you'd hate to abandon. All of a sudden you're just like, oh no, I don't want a complaint. And I have literally seen bullies, people who are like, what are you going to do about it? Yeah, okay, whatever. You seeing what you're seeing, and yeah, okay. Are you done? Because I got a client, right? The other piece, web content creators, if you're paying, and nobody's asking this, so I won't spend too much time on the ancillary folks. But I see a lot of folks who hire marketing agencies or web content creators to write the content that's supposed to be your voice, that's capturing your niche client. Don't do that. And then, of course, 1099 versus W-2, which we will talk about. So any questions or comments on the common mistakes? Okay, because I talked about scale, what scale means. It grows with you. It grows according to a strategic plan. And the idea is to move you out of the role of manager into the role where you enjoy yourself, which is entrepreneur, and technician, which is counseling, if that's what you enjoy. Just one second. Okay. My assistant, Jessica, is helping me with the questions too. Overwhelm, it's growing in spite of you. You do everything and you're building the plane in flight. You just have no strategic plan. So I'm going to go back to the common mistakes. You don't know the job well enough to know if it's done correctly. I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to pull up my policy and procedures manual template. Now, while that's there, I'm going to address how to find a good candidate. One of the best ways that I know to teach how to find a good candidate is to spend time with them. And when you spend time with them, not in a situation where the hierarchy is in place. So if you can imagine, you've got a graduate student who comes in and they're doing some filing for you, and then they're like, okay, would you please be my supervisor? And you're like, well, I know you, you're doing great. You've been here, you get along with everyone. So I'm going to hire you as an LPC associate. That is a wonderful model because you've already spent time with this person, you've grown them, you've helped them to become an LPC associate. Now you're going to follow them through the developmental model, and eventually they will become your colleague. This is the gold standard of finding good therapists to fit into your practice because they've already become acclimated to your culture. They already understand you. You've gone through the forming, storming, norming, transforming thing. So that's past you. You're not afraid of conflict with this person. With the new hire, with a brand new therapist, when you bring them on, remember 80% of their job is going to be done in secret. You won't see them to build a relationship with them. I mean, you can do socials and you can do CE events. And I am going to have an expert come talk to me in about 3 weeks. Her name's Amanda Escobar. She's grown her practice. She's done beautifully, but she's based it on supervision and hiring outside therapists. So I'm not saying it can't be done, but when you decide to hire someone that you've never met, you've never worked with, you've never established yourself as the boss. I remember one of my consultants, or one of the folks who came to me for a consultation, I wanted to buy her one of those mugs that just said, "I'm the boss." Because it's like, you got to own it, right? You have to own it, that it's your practice, it's your way or the highway. And I say that respectfully. So let me share the screen. And let's look at a policy and procedures manual if you choose to hire outside of your practice. Right? So you're just going to cold call. You're going on Indeed. By the way, whoever said that they were looking on Indeed and weren't having any luck, that is kind of the way things are since COVID. I've heard that more and more and more. Nobody's able to hire because everybody's kind of empowered to open their own practice. So having perks, having things like offering health insurance and retirement benefits, 401ks, that's becoming more of the norm as people try to attract quality clients, or I'm sorry, quality therapists. So one of the things with the policy and procedures manual template is the job description, the clinical director job description, responsibilities, qualifications. The director of operations, that's the person who's not you, who's doing all the minutia, making sure everybody clocks in on time, making sure everybody's got a key to the door. And I want you to even come up with a job description for your licensed professionals. The licensed professional agrees to, and this could be everything from show up on time, use this EHR, inform clients at least 24 hours ahead of time, everything that you would want in an employee, be very, very, very specific. And then if you do hire interns and practicum students, which I highly recommend, again, just a job description and an agreement, what they agree to, so that you've got the job description, you know what good looks like. And if you've ever been taught by me before, what are we doing? We're setting this up for an evaluation. We're setting this up for a probationary period where they get an evaluation and you can grade them on each of the criteria that you're hiring. Do you show up on time? Are you communicating with your clients? I don't know all the things that you would want to keep up with when you're hiring an independent therapist. And so I am going to talk about a model that I recommend, but don't let me forget, I'm writing it down. So the job description is important, not only for the evaluation, right? The orientation and the evaluation, but for the progressive discipline plan. So when we get to the progressive discipline plan, and if you get my emails, you saw the little 2-minute video. If you didn't, that's okay. I can show I'll get everybody the YouTube link. And basically I'm walking you through this. So it defines misconduct. The goal of our discipline plan system is to give the professional an opportunity to correct problems that may arise rather than to punish the professional. They will be kept informed of our rules and the professional is expected to follow them. So, short and sweet. But please, if you're a supervisor out there, please get out of the mindset of remediation. Remediation is a tool we use for supervision to teach. Right? When you sign a contract with a supervisee, the intention is to not break that contract, right? You are invested in this. You want to see this person grow into a colleague. And like I tell some people, they're going to get licensed anyway. It's very, very hard to keep someone out of the profession. So the remediation plan as a teaching tool is beautiful because you can help your supervisee learn the skill they're deficient in. as a CYA tool. And for those of you who don't know what I mean when I say CYA, cover your ass, right? So you want to make sure that you've documented your remediation plan because the law requires it. The LPC and LMFT both require remediation before termination. Now, Texas is a right to work state. So not the same thing when it comes to a progressive discipline plan. What this does is it helps get your ducks in a row as you're tracking whether or not this person is doing what they're supposed to be doing. And please stop me if I'm spending too much time on misbehavior, but these are just the consultations that I get in. So I can go a different direction too. So when people come to you, or I'm sorry, when you notice that your professional or your front office staff is misbehaving, now look what you have. You can fall back on your job description, your orientation, your policy and procedures manual. And if this is their first warning, wonderful. Hey, this is your first warning. I noticed that you wore a band t-shirt to work today with skulls all over it. We don't do that. Here at our counseling office, you got to wear a shirt with a collar and it's got to be tucked in. Now, immediate disciplinary action, again, this is not a remediation. This is boom, you're done, bye-bye. You document that. You document that it was in writing. And at the end of the policy and procedures manual, have a signature page that shows, yes, I understand this, even if they don't, because you're going to show it to them, you're going to teach it to them, you're going to evaluate them on this, so that if you notice they can't adhere to it, you can confidently approach them, give them their warning, their write-up, and whatever third strike you happen to do. And then if you need to, you can terminate them. Can they still go file for unemployment? Absolutely. But you will have an opportunity most of the time, at least I have in the past, when folks I've fired have decided to contest it. You basically get on the phone with somebody and say, okay, tell me your side. And so that's when you're talking to them and saying, nope, here's all the documentation I have. This is why they were fired. This is why I don't want them working for me. They may still get unemployment, but at least you had your documentation if they wanted to try to escalate that in any way. All right, so ask me questions about this. This is sort of combination front end, back end. Yes, Dr. Sean.
Okay, so I don't know if y'all see me wrestling here. I have a Doberman that every time I raise my arm, he slides his head up under. So I'm like trying to fight him off here. He's gotten used to mom being home on the computer, and it's been a few weeks and he's missing. So anyway, does this apply for both contract positions or just W-2? Does it apply to
everything? Anybody. I mean, except for the guys that you hire to come in and paint your office or something like that. But remember that coffee mug, you're the boss.
Mm-hmm.
And so this applies to everyone, anyone who dares to wear your logo and appear on your website and represent you in the community. And now you can see why I like the idea of growing your grad students, right? Imagine if you've got a grad student coming and helping you file, and they have to sign this, right? When they finally get licensed and you bring them on as a W-2 or a 1099, they are completely acculturated, right? To your style of doing business. Yeah, Michelle.
Yeah, I actually had a similar question. I think, my fear of putting something like this out there for somebody with like perhaps the 1099 was that it would be perceived like from the that document that does the side by side.
Oh, I've got it. That's next, right?
Yeah, that it would be perceived as I don't really have a better word for this, but it's like kind of being like overly controlling and overly
controlling. Yes.
overly dictating what the person said. And I was like, oh my gosh, if I would love to do something like this. This looks amazing, but like, am I going to get dinged on? No, that was truly like a W-2. And so I think it's good to see this. It's very comforting and extremely helpful. And I want to thank you because like I think that was a lot of my misperception, thinking that I would not be okay doing something like this. So.
No, that's a great question. And so let's pull the document up.
There it is.
There it is. All right. So this has to do with control, and I'm checking questions again. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. Yep. Okay, good. So an employee versus an independent contractor. And of course, for those of you who get confused by this term, it's because we use the terms interchangeably. An independent contractor is like the band you hire to play at your wedding. Your employee is going to be the person who comes in every day, does the same job, is directed by you. You know, I need you to clean in the corners. Next time I want you to clean the bathrooms a little better. So they're totally under your control. So control is a huge part of why we have such a dilemma when, as supervisors, if we have supervisors out there, when you're trying to hire your very own associate, right? When you're hiring your associate, you have way too much control over them. There are hierarchical and relationship issues, all kinds of things that disqualify them as an independent contractor. Now, I'm not an IRS agent. I just know many folks who've gotten audited and lost because they banked on this idea, or they gambled on the idea that they could hire their LPC associate as independent contractors. So I'm looking at this, and let's all just take a second and look at this, because I want to focus on this idea of control. Because already I'm seeing some things that would disqualify if you're hiring a professional, a licensed professional, to see clients under your name. Your work does not affect the overall success of the company. Oh, sure it does, right? Where you work is up to you. You choose the order. Well, I guess a licensed professional could. Your profits or losses are based on your business decisions. And this list always scares me. I'm not going to lie. When I think about hiring someone as an independent contractor, I really think of someone who has nothing to do with my business. Now, I'm not saying that if you hire a therapist as a 1099, you're doing it wrong at all, right? I think there are way too many nuances here for us to discuss. But if we just took this idea of, you know, I really don't think anybody you hire to see clients is completely independent, because anything they do will affect you. If we could take that and put it aside for a second and just look at this idea of imposing a formal, a policy and procedures manual, a progressive discipline plan, none of that takes any control away from anybody. In fact, let's do some parenting counseling, right? You're offering your employees choices, right? You're simply giving them the freedom to choose how to behave, knowing completely what the consequences are. So actually they're choosing that warning, right? They're choosing that write-up. They're choosing to be fired because of your transparency. So having the policy and the procedures manual and the progressive discipline plan in no way, shape, or form inhibits anyone from doing their job. It's not controlling them. It's simply transparency, helping folks understand the parameters, what they can and cannot do once they walk through the doors or appear under your logo if it's a teletherapy session. Okay, so let's pause for a second and please correct me if you need to get me back on track. One of the models I do talk about with licensed professionals is just, I think of it like the strip mall. You know, someone buys a strip mall, they're going to put in a Ross's, a Target, a liquor store, and something else, right? Completely different businesses. And each one of those businesses is independent. Obviously, they have their own LLC. And just to review, remember, an LLC is a limited liability corporation. It's a way to keep that lead curtain in between what goes on in your business and your personal assets, right? So imagine, if you will, you are going to bring on therapists to work in your practice, and they are all independent with their own LLCs, okay? Now, they can pay you rent if you offer them stuff, right? I don't imagine you have a literal strip center, right? So you're not going to give them parking or air conditioning or Wi-Fi and electricity. I mean, you will. But imagine you just, you're like, okay, so rent could be literal rent, how much it costs for the office. Let's see, we pay the front office staff this. This is the air conditioner broke last year, so it's brand new. So you know what? $2,000 a month. Flat fee, $2,000 a month. Your independent therapist pays you $2,000 a month. Now, they're independent. They have their own LLC. You have your own LLC. If they share your EHR, if they share the front office staff, if they share space on your website, that's all included in rent. Now you're not paying anybody. So the issue of 1099 and W-2 is moot. It's out the window. So this gets back to that idea of fee splitting. Again, stop me if I'm going too far off in the weeds. Fee splitting is this idea that if I have, if I've got Connie over here and Sean over here, and Connie is seeing clients at $100 an hour, and Sean's over here seeing clients for $200 an hour, and I've got, let's say I got a 40-60 split with both of them, who am I going to make more money off of? Right? So there's the impression that I might direct a few more clients to Sean because I'm going to make a little bit more money from Sean. So fee splitting gets hairy when people set their own rates for different services. So if you think, so what we recommend is if you have had a practice for a while and you've worked with the same people, and let's say you're doing fee splitting and you're trying to get off of that, usually you'll fall into a particular range. Yeah, I generally make, $1,000 to $2,000 from, no, let's even round it a little closer. I make between $1,000 and $1,200 from Dr. Sean every month. So instead of doing a percentage, I'm just going to charge Dr. Sean $1,200 a month to see clients in my office, no matter what. If she takes the whole month off and goes to Aruba, it doesn't matter. She still owes me $1,200, and that's what I put in our contract. So it's a flat fee as opposed to that percentage that goes up and down based on the number of clients that she sees. Yeah, Dr. Sean.
Okay, so maybe I missed something very important in there. So when you're talking about that, are you talking about an employee paying $1,200 a month?
I'm talking about if this is a whole different model, right? We're not doing W-2 or 1099 because you're not paying anybody. You only have to assign people a category of W-2 or 1099 if you're paying them.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So like currently the way my office is set up is basically what you were talking about in the beginning is I have 8 therapists that rent space.
And pay you.
And they pay me, but they all are independent businesses and they set up their own fees. They have their own EHR. They have all of that. And I'm trying to transition away from that because
what don't you like about it?
I want to make more money without working as hard. Because right now as landlord, I'm managing all of it. And so I want somehow to make money that I don't have to work for.
No, that's beautiful. And so that goes back to our idea of a strategic plan though, right? And I'm going to show you guys just something that, and it's super basic, but I'm going to show you this worksheet that I do with folks because I always want people to prove to me that they want to grow. Like, don't just tell me. I want you to prove that you really do want to grow. Because those of us who've had large practices know that sometimes your P&L, which is a profit and loss, sometimes your P&L looks exactly the same when you have the large practice as a even when your big practice and your small practice P&L look exactly the same. So if you're going to make a strategic plan, I want you to backwards plan. I want you to tell me how much money you want to make, how many clients you don't want to see, how many people you do want to manage, how much money you want going out, how much rent you want to pay in year 5, and then work me backwards to how this all gets better, because now you've got employees and contractors and you're having to cut 12 checks every month. Right? Because that's sometimes when we take it back to this idea of hiring. Remember, hiring is only necessary if you plan on paying a person. I'm going to hire a band so I can pay them for my daughter's wedding. Right? If I just open a strip mall and I say, okay, everybody come on, rent space from me, then I can hire someone to take in that cash. I can hire someone to make sure the maintenance is kept up. I can hire someone as a W-2 employee who is my manager to make sure all the things are running well. But I'm not here to push a particular model. I want you guys to, I want to stay back on track with hiring, because I know y'all's hearts are set on hiring, which is good sometimes. All right, so questions. All right, I'm going to show you, and I can give you this as well, an interview process for potential supervisees. And we're going to translate that into an interview process for hiring professionals, right? So our idea is we're ready to grow. Our strategic plan shows that we're on track. We're going to go buy this building. We need to fill the spaces, or my favorite, which is my community is really beating down the doors to my practice. I'm ready to start serving more people. What's the best way to do this? So, and I'll go back to my PowerPoint in a second. I'm not overwhelmed. It's not scaling in spite of me. And I'm trying to do something higher when I really don't need to. So the interview process for potential supervisees, this was developed by my mentor, Dr. Judy DeTrude. And, you know, it always starts with the resume, making sure that you're asking questions related to the counseling field, asking for a transcript, and then questions from the transcript. References, and we include in our toolkit a release of information to talk to any former professors or supervisors. So let's translate that for hiring a licensed professional, right? You might not care about their transcript, right? But you definitely would want a release of information to talk to previous employers. You would want counseling specific questions, but keeping in mind, you would never, ever get to see how they counsel. So maybe you would want to develop ethics type questions. Have you ever had a complaint filed against you? Have you ever been arrested? Have you ever been convicted? Remember now with the LPC in Texas, I'm sorry, BHEC, every license, we now have background checks. So it's comforting to know that everybody we hire has been through a background check, right? So really you're just looking at, well, I tell you what you're looking at. You're looking at hiring someone who is either matching your values or not. So the values that you have outside of the therapy room are things like, I mean, I keep harping on like being on time, never no-showing. I know that's a double negative. Never no-showing your clients. So if you think about deal breakers, the worst case scenario, other than a client having, you know, a therapist having sex with a client, just let's brainstorm a minute. What are the worst things you can think of that might come up hiring a fully licensed person? I don't even want to go with the graduate students and the associates. What's the worst thing that you can imagine happening that you'd have to deal with?
The first thing that popped in my mind was like breach of confidentiality.
So a HIPAA violation?
Yes. I mean, I know I'm a landlord, but there have been times I've gotten onto them and going, you're in this building. That's not okay.
Okay,
So
I'm going to write that down. So HIPAA violation. Somebody else give me one.
I was also going to say HIPAA violations, but another one, having been in this position before as a clinical supervisor, people who do not complete their documentation in a timely manner.
Okay. What else? And these can be pet peeves. They don't have to be like, you know, important sounding things. What do you value? And
not following the office policy and procedures for security. Like our office is an old home remodeled in the middle of a neighborhood. And so I have a wrought iron gate around it. And so the expectation, we all park in the back and the doors are unlocked. And so the expectation is that gate is locked at all times. And I blow a gasket when they leave that open because we are in these offices, doors shut, and anybody could walk in. And so for me, it's like just following the safety policies and procedures for the building is a pet peeve for me.
okay,
I think it's a little more than a pet peeve, but
agreed. No, that's a good policy. What else? Anybody?
One of mine would be constantly being late and having your clients sitting in the waiting room.
Okay. Late for clients. I hate that one. Okay, so I'm going to take those 4. So with HIPAA violations, not completing documentation, procedures for the building, and late for clients. And it's interesting. That's why I wanted to show you this interview set, because that has nothing to do with your clinical expertise, right? In fact, one of the things we teach in the 40-hour training is a personality mismatch, right? If you're one of those kind of I don't know, the kind of straight-laced supervisor and then the super flaky supervisee, right? And those would be people I would naturally fire. But I've taught myself to get to know them so that I can see if they have clinical skills, because that's what I do as a supervisor. I want to see, okay, maybe we've got some clinical skills in there and we can kind of shape the rest. As a business owner, none of these questions matter. You want to know if they can follow the rules, from HIPAA to locking a gate to completing documentation to being late for clients. So as the owner, to hire right, avoid overwhelm, to scale correctly, all of the things, you come from this defensive position, right? It's like when we used to hire a babysitter for my son, we used to make this list super long. These are a list of things my son cannot do. He cannot cook in the attic. He cannot build a fire on the lawn. He cannot, right? And so anything that we, he could think of, we tried to think of. Well, that's just going to drive you batty. So HIPAA violations, that's the easiest one, because you have to have an officer, a point person in your business who is your HIPAA compliance officer. Every year you have to do a self-audit. Every year you have to document everything that happens that compromise HIPAA in some way. And if it's 500 people or more, you have to notify the media, any violation. Now, if you watched, I see some faces, so it's okay. If you have a YouTube video on this, and I also interviewed Vanessa Hillis, who talked to us about this, stuff happens. It happens all the time. But as a business owner, and you're thinking from your defensive spot, you're ready. You are absolutely ready, because if it's something you can fix, like a gate, then you've got your progressive discipline plan. If it's something you cannot fix because it's an email system that's going to cost your company $10,000 a month, you write it down as a known liability that you don't intend to fix right now, but it's in your policy and procedures manual, and you will follow up in your progressive discipline plan. So HIPAA violation, probably the easiest place to offer your employees choices about how they want to act, right? Not completing documentation, unfortunately, you will probably never know, because with a licensed professional, right, if they choose to use your EHR system, HIPAA says nobody is supposed to even look at that unless they have a reason to get into those files, right? And it's not like we're in a hospital and everybody's accessing each other's notes because there are x-rays down the hall and blood tests, right? There's really no reason for anybody to access documentation. So you're back to your policy and procedures manual. If something comes down, not if, but when, having something in place where if a complaint comes through and you're able to say, well, we showed him or her this in our contract, we showed this in our policy procedures, we showed this in our orientation, they've never been written up for it, we had no idea. Do with this person what you will, right? And I hope everybody's kind of comparing, okay, what would happen if this person was an LLC on their own with their own EHR responsible for their own records? It would be a little bit different. Yes, that's true for associates as well. As of February 2022, associates can own their own records. Procedures for the building, now you're down to a write-up and firing. And that's hard too, because you're thinking, well, I really don't want to fire a therapist because they don't lock a gate. So what you're doing instead is you're just turning everybody else sour because you're not punishing the person who's doing it. You're holding these lengthy meetings punishing everybody for what everybody knows is one person's thing, right? So again, a lot of these hiring issues, oh, my pleasure, Olivia. A lot of these issues have to do with the back end, because I think a lot of you, I mean, I think all of you can hire beautifully. I think you can read those interview questions, but as you get to know someone and you start to see their weaknesses and you start to see, okay, they don't lock gates. They're late for their clients. You've got to write them up immediately so you can document that, because you will fire them. Because if you don't, now you're opening yourself up to liability, right? Oh gosh, well, we're looking at the file. This person had 14 write-ups. Why didn't you fire them? Well, because it's scary to fire people, right? So I'm going to take us back to the PowerPoint. And as I mentioned, I'm happy to not post, but I have everybody's email who signed up for tonight, so I can get you guys. Is that what I'm doing? No, screen 2. There we are. Does everybody see scale? You're looking at a little slide that says scale. Okay, good. I'm not going to take it back to the project or to the presentation. So why hire in the first place? We hire because we're overwhelmed. We're business owners and things have gotten out of control. We're in a community where people are beating down the door. We want to serve. We're getting burned out. Or the opposite, we're bored, right? We kind of just want something a little bit different. We kind of want to shake up the business plan a little bit. We don't know how to do it. Again, that's the realm of our CPA and our attorney and our web designer. It's not, you don't feel like you're in your zone of genius, and that happens to everybody, right? I always say I change careers completely about every 14 years. I find a new zone of genius. And then time to scale. That just is, it's the same thing as overwhelm. If your strategic plan is going beautifully and you're like, okay, I knew this was coming. I knew it was going to be time to bring in another therapist. I planned ahead. I got this extra office space. It's time for me to hit Indeed. You're doing it backwards. Don't rent anything until you have a warm body to fill that space. And I'm just going to go through these again. So stop me if now it's bringing up other things now that we've had this discussion. I think all of us know the job of counselor, but what you're learning, it's not just that job. You're learning the job of how to be a good employee. A gate locking, HIPAA compliant, note-taking, on time for your client's employee, because that's really what you're hiring. I mean, if you're hiring a physician, they may be the best bone doctor on the planet, but if they don't show up for surgery or they show up intoxicated, you're really just coming down to, is this a good employee or not? You're going to have a policy and procedures and orientation, but you're not going to make that the whole show. How many of you are kind of thinking maybe you would hire from the grad student and kind of grow your own professional? Think about it. Think about it. And then you think you're supposed to have it, but you really don't need it, which is you're just following shiny objects everywhere. And you're hiring things out that you don't need, like your social media manager and your content creator and your marketing team, or you need it, but it's gotten so out of control. And this is where I find most employers. You've hired somebody, you've trained them, they got their EMDR certification. I've had folks pay for supervision. You know, when I offer that 40-hour training, I always, especially when we were in person, I used to ask, sounds super nosy, but I would ask, who's paying for this? And I would see these private practices paying for folks to come take the 40-hour training. So that is a sunk cost. That's where you're thinking, well, I don't want to fire them. I just spent $600 getting them trained. And so that's what can happen when we talk about therapy bullies or therapy ghosts, because they know there are some sunk costs. And so in supervision, we talk about that relationship, that hierarchical relationship. As the boss, you have to maintain that. So I didn't want this presentation to segue kind of into, you know, being the boss, but really that is the most important part. Well, one of the most important parts of hiring is understanding you've got to fill a position. You're not just hiring because you feel like it, right? This is a have to when you hire. All right, I want to open it back up to you guys. We're right at 7 o'clock, so we could go a few more minutes. Tell me what I have not covered or what you wish I had covered that I didn't.